Hello and welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett, and in today's presentation we're going back to Python, and we're going to take a look at Python and networking and how we can test our DHCP servers on the network. Now, we've all probably had situations where we're not quite certain that a DHCP server is operating, so isn't it great to be able to have our own tools that we can use to test the functionality of those services? We're going to write a script that will then go through and communicate to our DHCP server and confirm that we're getting an IP address through the script. So here we are on our glorious command line, the command line of my Raspberry Pi. The main thing to understand here is that we need to be working on a device that has access to a network that has a DHCP server, because, believe it or not, we are testing a DHCP server here. We're going to be creating a Python script that goes through and creates a DHCP request so we can see that we are actually getting good responses from the DHCP server. So when we're ready, sat comfortably, we are going to begin. An important thing when working with Python is to make sure we're working in virtual environments if we don't need this in our system Python. So we're going to be installing modules. So I'm going to make sure that I've got the Python 3 virtual environment installed. I do, but it would be apt install -y Python 3 and then -venv. It's showing me that it's up to date and at the latest version. So of course then I don't have to do anything. With virtual environments, very often we have multiple virtual environments, making sure that we can install modules for whatever we need. To organize them, very often we'll have a directory called venv. You can see I've got my directory here called venv, and inside of that I've got one virtual environment called Ansible. Now I'm going to create a new virtual environment for my DHCP client. So I can go through and create that with Python 3, -m, pulling up the venv module, and we're going to create the virtual environment DHCP, which in fact is going to create a subdirectory with a clean and fresh version of Python inside of my current directory. So that's now created my virtual environment. I can activate it by using the source command, going into that newly created DHCP directory and bin and activate. And we can see now that I've got DHCP as part of my prompt. So this is the environment that I'm working in. So now as I go through and install a Python module with my pip3 install program and installing the networking module SCAPI, it will go through and add it into this environment and not into my system environment. So long as this is the Python environment that is running, we are going to be able to use this module. But this module is designed to work at the low level of networking. So we're going to need root privileges to be able to execute it. There's no point me doing sudo and Python, because if I use sudo and Python, it won't pick up on the environment, so I can gain a full shell as root and activate that virtual environment inside of the root user's home directory. I don't need to recreate it, I just need to activate it. So I go through and access the Pi user's home directory, the virtual environment subdirectory, DHCP, bin, and activate. And look at that, I've got that same prompt then showing as DHCP. So this is running that virtual environment we created as my standard user Pi. We can go ahead now and start creating our script. And our script is going to send a request to the DHCP server on the network so we can test that DHCP is up and running. It becomes a great tool to use. But be careful if you're using it on a network that you don't own. I'm going to begin by creating my .vimrc file to make sure any color coding that I get is going to be visible. So set BG equals dark. I'm using a dark background. And with that set, I should be good to go. I'm going to go back to Vim and I'm going to create then the dhcp.py file. Now, as I say, make sure you've got the correct privileges on your network to run this. We put in our normal shebang, making sure that we're picking up Python 3 from our environment, and we can then start building our code. We need to import from the module that we've just installed, so scapy.all. We can import then everything. There can be various things that we use from the Scapy module. We're going to go into the Scapy configuration, and we can run check IP address, and we can just set this to false. So we don't go through and check for our IP address when we're running the code. Now, having imported everything from Scapy, we can start making use of it. And I'm creating a DHCP discover packet here. As we go through, we're using the Ethernet function from Scapy, where we're setting our destination to be a broadcast. We're generating a random MAC address. Again, that function is coming from Scapy, and we're making sure this is being set up for IP version 4. Our IP is going to be the source address 0.0.0.0.0. We're setting up our destination broadcast address. So we've got the two layers here. We've got our network address and we've got our hardware address. We're setting the destination port to be UDP port 67, and we're then sending it from the source port 68. We're setting our boot P options, and we're then setting our option 1, and we're setting our client hardware address to the random MAC address again. And the DHCP options that go along with boot P is that we're sending a DHCP discover. So I've pasted that in because that's a reasonable amount of typing, and I don't want to get that wrong, but we can type the rest of it up. I can set up a variable to go through and store my answer. And again, we can use then a function send and receive packet 1. So this is our lower levels of our stack. And we can send out that DHCP discover packet that we've just created. And we need to send it out to your interface. So iFace equals ETH0. Make sure it's going out to your correct interface name. On mine, it's ETH0, could be different on yours. And at the moment, we'll set the verbosity to 0, so we don't get any extra information showing on our screen. We can close off that function, so close off our round brackets. And now we can test to see what we're getting back. So I'm just using if answered. So if we've got something coming back, then that's going to be true. We can just space in a little bit and put another if statement. And we can check to see that we've got DHCP in our answered variable. Again, put the colons because that's the end of our if statement. And just moving in a couple of spaces below that, but let's just make sure we are 2 spaces in above. Let me just tidy this up. So that's the correct indentation that we are using. I can go to the end of the line and then make sure I'm now 4 spaces inside from the end of our line. So we're 2 spaces inside of the second if statement. We can set up then the IP address that we've been offered. So I'm setting up a variable called offered IP, and we can then go through it into answered, look for the boot P key and the field for our yielded IP address, the IP address that we've been given. So YIADDR. And we can then go through and print out the variable offered underscore IP. We're using print with the F here, so we can then combine our text and variables together. And we do that using the brace brackets and our variable name offered underscore IP inside of the brace brackets. We can close off our brace brackets, close off our double quotes, and close off the parentheses for the print function. And that's it. So if we have got the DHCP request inside of answered, we're going to be able to print it through to the screen. Else, so if it doesn't, we can see that there was no IP address offered. So it's assuming we've got a response from the DHCP server, but there was no IP address in that. And now we come back to our else statement for the outer if. So if we don't have answered, well, we didn't get a response from a DHCP server. The DHCP server was down, or it certainly wasn't responding. So different to not getting an IP address, it's just not getting a response from the server. Either there is no DHCP server, the DHCP server is down, or it's filtering, it's not picking up packets from us. And that's it. That is our code. And it's relatively simple because it's really the Scapy module doing all of our work. So we can go through and save that. Now it's the fun of executing it. Python 3. And then we can use escape and dot to bring up the script name. Then we can see that we did get an offered IP address coming back. So we've been able to test that our DHCP server is up and running on the network. If I go back and edit the file and change to the verbosity, so going back to where we have our answered variable, and we can then go through and set our verbosity to 1 and see the difference. If I run it again, we can see then that we get the start, sending packages, got a response, and we can see then that we've been offered the next IP address in the sequence. So we have to be careful. What we don't want to do is send this too many times, because we can then dry up all of the IP addresses that are available on the network. But it's a great and simple way for testing that DHCP is active on your system.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.